All right, the hour being 8 o'clock, call the meeting to order. Supervisor's payments. All right, we'll open this up for public comment. I'm very disappointed to see these many people in here without masks on, the epidemic that we're in right now, but that's your privilege, I guess, but I'm really not very happy about it, so. All right, we'll open up public comment. We have 30 minutes.
Summers.
Is now joining.
Well, I respect your fear of whatever, but I'm going to address you guys with some of the finest stupidity that has come from our public health department to our school systems.
Who are you?
I'm Joe Browning. We have, I know of two particular families that go to the Beaver Dam School District. There's a set of twins. They go to the same building where school is being held. One is in one classroom and one is in a different classroom. One classroom has to stay home. Where do you think that twin goes at the end of the day? Because that second twin can go to school. You know, they're going to the same house. They're living in the same house. Another prime example is where my son goes to school. There's a family with a first grader, a fifth grader, and a seventh grader. The fifth graders in the fourth and fifth grade is to stay home because of the quarantine or whatever, directed by our public health over here. The first and the seventh grader go to school and home to the same, brother that they have, ever since they were, born. This whole thing has come down to really, is it a fear-demic, as other people have stated in the past? Is it, really? When you look at the numbers, there is over a 99% survival rate. I think that our public health officer here has plenty of time shown us that she will twist numbers, figures, or comments to put us all in the hot seat, so we need to be afraid. I don't see it. The numbers are not here. I ask, please, that you hold her to the same math standards that you and I grew up with. When you start out with your big number and you minus off the different factors, that you end up with a zero-sum factor. Not, well, this over here or that over there. I've been in enough of these meetings and I've seen it. And if she doesn't want to come up and give us straight exactly the way it is, then I would ask the board that they gladly accept her resignation if she can't do that, or the board look at possibly defunding that position or putting somebody in that position that is going to tell us exactly the way it is, and all of the other whatever agenda or thought process that goes in, just the straightforward, not the consensus, but the actual science, the facts, and the truths. We've been led on since day one with all the models and everything else that we've heard. You guys have heard them.
I got another one.
Nothing adds up to a zero-sum game in the end. That's all I have to say.
My name is Brad Williams. I'm in Mayville. Thank you all for your public service. It is reasonable and prudent to expect public policy to follow the science. We all know that this is no plague. This might not be so scary if we had more specific information from our health department. Perhaps our department only needs to report the bare bones to qualify for more CARES Act taxpayer funds. But we deserve more specifics, such as how many cases had symptoms, what is the percentage of recovery, if we have a flu shot, will we test positive, how many hospitalizations are one-night stays for observation, how many stays result in a negative case, how many result in deaths, what is the death rate, and what were the underlying causes of death listed on the death certificate. You deserve this information to form policy. Your follow-up will be appreciated. Thank you.
My name's Ross Purdy from Town of Hubbard. I've been in healthcare for 25 years. I've got a Bachelor of Science, and I appreciate your concern for wearing a mask, but your mask does not stop the coronavirus. I've said that before to you. It's far too small, and the filter on your mask is far too big to have any effect. Might possibly affect when you cough, spreading germs and droplets in the air, but I don't know that there's any real science to support that that's made any difference. How many deaths have we had in Dodge County? 9 is the last number I heard.
19.
19 now? That's a tragedy, but wearing masks is gonna make any difference with that in public? I know how to wear a mask, and I've seen how people wear masks in public, and they don't have a clue. And you can't tell me it's gonna make any difference. So I'm not disappointed people are not wearing masks in here because it's kind of pent up. Anyways, I'd like to know why we are listening and entertaining and considering what the Wisconsin Counties Association has to say. Who are they? Are they Dodge County residents? Do they care about what happens in Dodge County? I don't know who they are, and I don't think you should be listening to them. They have Dodge County's interest not in mind. Anytime government gets bigger, anytime government gets more bureaucracy, and of course passing this healthcare health officer ordinance, it's just gonna bloat government. It's gonna take more of my tax money that's already being spent on a $50,000 fence for the courthouse, as if BLM and Antifa are coming in attacking it. Being spent on a automatic car wash in the highway garage. Boy, that must be nice. Those are our tax dollars. What are you doing to represent us and look after our concerns? Empowering a health officer with legal and physical powers over the residents of the county, I don't see that as being a positive thing. We don't need bigger government, we need less government. As a healthcare worker, a lot of the laws have good intentions that our lawmakers make, but some of them make my job more difficult, and some of them are just stupid. And I don't want the government telling me how to do my healthcare. They're not doctors and physicians that are on the front lines and know what's going on, and for every doctor you have that says, oh, you better wear a mask, you're gonna find just as many that say it's stupid. I know, I've talked to them. So please, Wisconsin County Association, you've got no business listening to them. They're not Dodge County residents who you are supposed to be representing. They are not our people. I don't know who they work for. I don't know what kind of carrots they're dangling that would make it, whatever they're promoting, attractive. And what happens when that money runs out that they're attracting you to dive after. We gotta be physically responsible. I'd like to see what you guys can do to cut my property taxes in half. Or whatever taxes you have the ability to control. I don't want you to increase my spending. I'd like to retire in a few years and have some money to pay my mortgage. Some of you maybe got nice, very fat pensions coming, but not all of us do. Not all of us do. So, how about thinking about the little man here? How about watching out for our fiscal responsibility? And we don't need big government and bloated bureaucracy. That never works out good. That's a bad direction to go into. You should be running in the opposite direction, please.
Hey, Colin, Town of Alva. First of all, I want to thank all of you guys for your service being on the board right now, because I know right now you're probably getting more phone calls about this stuff than you've ever had, and it gets to be a job, so thank you. First of all, I'd like to say I've actually been affected by COVID-19 personally. My business partner passed away recently from it, but I will tell you this. He would not be encouraging of letting any of this turn into a permanent mandate. If you give power to someone, you never get it back. It's like a tax. You get a tax, you start a tax, it never goes away. Understand that. And I would appreciate it if you guys would take that into consideration. There's a lot of people here today. I would probably just venture a guess that the majority of them are not in favor of this proposal by the counties. I don't know if the counties association's proposal or however they word it, but their recommendations for our county. I think he hit it on the head. They don't live in Dodge County, vast majority of them. We do. Dodge County is a special place. We are different than any other county. And I think that's why we all love where we live and what we do here. We don't need more power taken from us. This comes down to individual responsibility. If you think a mask is going to help, if you've looked at the things that, the information that's out there, and you think you should be wearing a mask, that's fine. But this isn't about masks. This is about shutting down businesses, which eventually is taking people out of their homes, which is eventually less tax revenue for the county. We don't need to give that power to an unelected bureaucrat. I know it has to get pushed back through the county board chairman to okay anything. I believe all of you gentlemen and ma'am are well-intentioned and good people and wouldn't want to strip anybody of their rights. But if we pass this, in 20 years, we have a new generation in here. 30 years, we have a new generation in here. You gentlemen and ma'am are not going to be the ones that are going to make those decisions. And we have a whole new group of people who are not necessarily on the same page as what you are for protecting freedoms. So I ask that you carefully consider before you do anything. I know you're just going to discuss it today, but kill it here in the committee. Let's not get it before the whole board. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Good morning, Dan Sigmund here, and just have some quick things to run through. There's some information in front of you of some material you should have gotten already, but I want to make sure you get it again about Free and Dodge. I'm here representing hundreds of people that are a member of Free and Dodge and some hundreds more that aren't a member that can't make it, especially at meetings at Monday morning at 8 o'clock. But I want to just reference one item on the agenda first, and that is the resolutions from other counties. As I took a look at that, I'd say please be careful because it sounds like it's environmentalists fighting the American farmer again. We have a lot of farmers in Dodge County, so I wasn't able to look at all the information on it, but I want you to just be wary of that. Specifically now, as there's many people here that would like to address this issue about rights violations, constitutional freedoms, and so on, I urge you to always keep your oath of office front and foremost in your minds, and the resolution 20-14 of reaffirming that, which is going to be very instrumental in what happens here. The reason people are uncertain is because there's so much silence. Nobody knows exactly who's thinking what. Everybody's been tucking things away or hiding things and not talking about things, and that's why everybody has concerns. And the main concern then is because we believe that there's only a few supervisors that really care about protecting the citizenry, and that as they conduct government business, this is what should be first and foremost on their mind. Specific items on the agenda that I'd like to address, actually specifically to each individual member of the executive committee. Supervisor Schaefer, you don't really say much about any items that come on the agenda here in front of discussion. But the reason we the people, especially in the district, are very concerned is because when we do talk to you, we receive things like, I don't want to hear anything that you really have to say about this, and I'm not interested in what you say, and I'll read it myself and excuse me, make up my own decision. We have a hard time saying that's what a supervisor and our representative should be like. So that's a concern for us. Supervisor Froley, thank you for all your work. We were just together at the Highway Commission meeting. I appreciated how you took funds from the equipment purchase fund and diverted it to highways just to try to make things a little more reasonable. Our concern here is, as you have heard, the WCA and what it is about. And I know you are on the board of directors at the WCA, that you support their work, and excuse me, everybody here probably does too. Agenda item number 10, the recommendations and guidance that are going to be viewed here. We're going to see, if you look at the materials I gave you, that they actually violate the Constitution, the rights and the freedoms that we are to enjoy. It encourages bigger government, and whenever government gets bigger, our rights get diminished. And once government continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger, you suddenly have socialism. There's no people's rights at all. So we have to guard against that thing happening. I also understand that the Wisconsin County Association passed resolution, what do they call it, 2020 Conference Resolution number 6, in which they are requesting the Wisconsin State Legislature to change the law to not allow parents to make personal decisions to raise their children based upon their personal convictions and personal beliefs. Why would the County Association make that resolution number 6? To quash the opt-out rule for parents when they want to raise their children, their own children. The state is going to take and remove that freedom and right of raising children and recommend that to the Wisconsin State Legislature. I question who's really behind all that. And this spring, I believe they passed a resolution to show support for Marxist, anti-American, anti-family, anti-law and order, anti-police organization which has caused violent riots and burned down cities. And they supported them this spring with a resolution or such like that, and we were supposed to trust their guidance. I think we need to protect the best interest of your constituents first. Supervisor Marsick, you've been caught in the middle of following leadership's general guidelines and doing what is, I believe, right for your constituency. Item agenda number 17, the declaration of local state of emergency. It was interesting that we're hanging on to this local state of emergency so we can continue to feed off the state trough of free money, grant money. We've been in this 8 months and there is no state of emergency. We haven't lived through one. Maybe you all have. I'm 62 almost, and I can remember polio and things like that. But everybody, pretty much that's around in Dodge County of the youngers, have never lived through a local state of emergency, a real emergency, and this has been sort of pushed on them as that. But we have to get away from that. Free money is never free. There's always a give and take. And as I looked at the money through the CARES Act, that funding has been extended. You can apply for more funding now in areas. Contact tracing and associated activities that weren't covered are all of a sudden now being covered again. So we see how government is moving things through and getting you to come to their trough to take their money, but it has to specifically be used against the citizenry. It is of concern to us, and that's why we are here too. We do not want to sell out the freedom and rights of the constituency. Supervisor Kotke, agenda item number 13, County Board Rule 14 has been a thorn in the flesh of many people, and we have changes coming to it today. Basically, it is unconstitutional on its face if you understand the Constitution and representative government. One individual, no matter who he is or what position they are in, should never be able to make a decision for the whole county, in this case, when all the people's supervisors are present in the room to be able to make that decision in a representative kind of way. So rather than try to change this, just get rid of it. It really isn't needed. That's why we have representative government. Because as I looked at the changes, I don't believe it would have made any difference anyhow with what happened in June. So we have to continue to look first and foremost primarily at our constituency as we do our government business. Supervisor Filbert, he took an oath of office, but he voted against Resolution 20-14, which reaffirmed that oath of office, which is the most important part of our responsibility as a supervisor. Why did you vote against it? You plainly said it's because of a specific reason. It didn't specifically mention support for a Marxist, anti-American, anti-family, anti-law and order, anti-police organization which held violent riots and burned down parts of our cities. And so therefore you weren't going to vote for it. And that is of great concern for us, and I would say especially for your constituency, because that's your main job, is to protect their rights. So why special mention? They are already in that. They already have their rights protected, so why this special attention? We don't know. Also, your derogatory remarks on the sheriff's business Facebook page, that's not something a leader should do in a county against the sheriff. It's not how it should be run. So we would like your politics to not get involved with this position because it's supposed to be nonpartisan position. Supervisor Sheehan Malloy, you do understand what it means to be a representative. I appreciate that. You listen to people and you talk with them. I've talked to many other individuals who have had conversations with you, and they believe you're really listening and you want to know. You are fiscally responsible. We see you fighting for getting rid of waste. It hasn't made you popular, but that is what we are looking for also. Agenda item number 10, those kind of things you supported in the past, and I believe personally you're in a battle between public safety and protecting rights and fiscal responsibility. It's sort of hard, and we want to continue to encourage you to do those things, but also encourage you to open your mind to grasp what the Constitution's about and how public safety and those kind of things are important, but protecting the rights and freedoms of the individuals are even more important, and they both can be done at the same time, but in the right order. So that we appreciate also, and Supervisor Schmidt, I see hasn't been able to make it. I see, and he's not quite where we would like to see him when it comes to spending money. But you know what's most important, where he is spot on? He is for the people, protecting their rights, protecting their freedoms, and that's while he's doing government business. That's his priority. And so we thank him for that. So why are the people all concerned? As I've seen here, and as we've seen here, 5 of the 7 members of the executive committee, which is the leadership, the steering wheel that turns the Board of Supervisors, we believe really aren't aware enough of what the primary responsibility is that they have due to their oath of office and the resolution that was passed. We have to change that WCA guidance. You saw 60 pages of stuff. And what happened on page 5, the end of the first paragraph, it's a disclaimer. If you do and follow any of this guidance that we have presented, we are not going to be held responsible. You have to watch out for yourself. Why would they do that? I just say, in common man's legal, it's a bunch of slippery lawyers that have put this together and have saved their butts. Okay, it's all placed on you. And that's because it is a problem. It is unconstitutional on its face also, as I have given you other items. The middle of September, I sent you 2 pieces of information. This is one that's in front of you. Another one is about the WCA's guidance. So, page 4, it says the committees were guided by 4 principles. Did you notice in those 4 principles how much of the Constitution was mentioned? Zippo. The 5th principle should have been, how do we keep a health and welfare ordinance constitutional? They knew it was there because throughout the whole ordinances, throughout the whole recommendation and guidance, they're trying to skirt around constitutional issues and not meet them. That is what I see as I went through it. They bring up Jacobson in Massachusetts as the primary case law that says we have to do this. Have any of you ever read Jacobson versus Massachusetts? It's an old one. The city in Massachusetts, I got it here. City of Cambridge, their board adopted wasn't a resolution, it's called a regulation that forced vaccination of smallpox on everybody that hadn't been vaccinated within the past 5 years at that time. And then they passed another one that gave a local physician the authority to carry out that one. And the court ruled on the side of the state for 2 basic reasons. And there's more to it, but the 2 basic reasons were, since the regulations had been put in place prior to this happening, there was some teeth in it, and then this fella, Jacobson, had a problem, and he had to abide by it. Another problem was, when Jacobson went to the court, he did not have any expert witnesses to validate what he was saying are the reasons that he shouldn't have to take it. Today, it is over 100 years later. This decision is ripe for being overturned. Do not plant your feet on it. We have expert witnesses that they didn't have back then that will prove that what he had said and was worried about is true today. And we in Dodge County do not have this ordinance in place to give any teeth to any kind of orders. And that's what we, the people, are fighting here. We do not want to see one in place. The same reason that Andrea Palm was defeated is the same reason that we do not have any way to enforce the illegal activities that Governor Evers is pulling right now. So there's plenty of things different, and those are some concerns that I've had there. Was there anything else? Just as a conclusion, I have a federal court waiting if we have to hear a case about right violations and constitutional freedoms being violated. 3 years ago, a State Department backed me into a corner with conditions similar to what's going on here. And we went to federal court against them. And the court sided with me because I had not only provided the evidence that it happened, but because I had forewarned them that this was going to violate my civil rights. If I wouldn't have warned them, they would have been a lot harder to win. But I did, and they had to pay all the bills because their oath of office demanded that protection, and they decided they were just going to roll right over we the people. You can't do that in a constitutional form of government. So you have been warned multiple times kindly. And this ordinance needs to not go any further. The WCA guidance is trash. It needs to be deep sixed. The judicial remedy will be pursued because the courts are there for we the people. The courts aren't there for government. The courts are there to protect we the people from the government. And when you leave this room, you are we the people also. Right now, you're sitting here with no rights. When you take this government office, you enter a fictional position that is not real. It's created by we the people. And we are forming this government, have formed it for these reasons. So I urge you to reevaluate how we do business in Dodge County because it could be a lot better for everybody. Thank you.
You said it all.
Start with the comment about disappointment not wearing masks. Let me just go back quick to the number of meetings I've been to, and I come to the next one. And all the truth I've heard people share, it's like it has no effect. I remember a lady a couple of meetings ago had 5 or 6 sheets of paper, all government. Statistics prove this is a bunch of nonsense. Was she listened to? No. And she had government statistics. The masks. You can go to any manufacturer of those masks, and they're going to state, the one, as I had in one paper. They put that warning out there for masks like you're all wearing, that they stop nothing. They do not stop any virus. Why? I can see why. Because if they didn't have that, they could have all kinds of lawsuits. Now, that's a tiny truth among a whole bunch that's been shared with this board and the whole board. No effect. You side with the government, not the people. You could fill up a couple sheets of paper of the lies the government's fed us. How 10 years ago, COVID-19, Rockefeller Center, trial test. October 2019, Bill Gates, World Economic Forum, Johns Hopkins Center, COVID-19 test trial. Now come on. I'm not the brightest character in the world, but I don't need to be hit in the head with a 2x4. the last thing I'd like to leave you with, there's a reason in God's word. Jesus shares, even when he comes, people are going to be doing what they always do, the masses. Because why? They don't know what's in God's word. It's also in God's word about one global government, which, if anybody's paying attention, even on mainstream news, this is all about one global government. So, if nothing else, I would take heed to God's word. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, then we'll go into the number 3 on the agenda. Consideration of minutes of September 14th and 22nd. Motion to approve. Second. Second by Schaefer. All right. All in favor say aye. Aye. Against? Ayes have it. There's one resolution from another county in there. Appearances before the committee. Vicky and Deb Reinhardt from Drive.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to see you all again. I know the last time I came, I was new to the organization. As you know, I'm the Director of Business Development for Thrive Economic Development Group. So I started June 1st. In the last 4 months, I've gone out and met with the majority of the communities, really trying to build a foundation for the work that we're going to be doing. Communities all very, very welcoming. Explained to me, really the reason for my visits with them was just to get an understanding of what the communities were looking for. And the majority of them came back saying that they were looking for growth in housing. Some were also looking for business growth. And so my goal again was to go in and get an understanding, introduce myself, meet them, and learn more about what their goals were. Also learn about the types of support that they had, so that we could best support the businesses. And as you see in my report, we've had a pretty active last 4 months. So I'm very optimistic about the work that we're doing, and again, a foundation that we're building in order to continue that work.
Thanks, Deb.
Sure.
Good morning. Nice to see you all again. Just to build on what Deb has been doing, very often our municipal leaders have good relationships with their existing businesses, and very often they don't, which is exactly what we found. So the goal here was twofold. As you know, we've been very active with businesses across Dodge County for the last several years, and so some of it was also to partner with our municipalities to say, hey, do you know this, what's going on at this business? Do you know what's going on at that business? And again, the goal here is to make sure that our communities, your communities here in Dodge County, are ready for business investment opportunities, are prepared for what they're going to be asked to do. As a matter of fact, I've been swapping emails this morning with a municipality who's being asked to do something by a business that's looking to make an investment and looking to expand, and the municipality is struggling with, how do we get this done, what do we do? That's part of what we're here for. So you've got a report in front of you. You know what's been going on the last few months. We've got a press release pending on an investment and an expansion in Dodge County that I can't talk about until we get it out there. So that's coming very, very soon. The deal's done. We're just waiting. A couple of other things I just want to bring front of mind for this group. We are starting our pre-campaign work. So as you know, we have the next 5 years of funding, the 2022 to 2026 fundraising campaign for Thrive Economic Development. And this is again to go out and have conversations with the private sector and try to raise more of the private sector support for economic development. And we're also in the midst of doing a housing study for Jefferson County. This has been proposed for Dodge County as well. We got a great deal on being able to do that for both counties, but there's been just some conversation about that. It's not in your budget to do that, so we're pending that. But housing continues to be a huge issue. We were just with a Dodge County employer a week and a half ago who has built a tremendous amount of worker housing because that's what's needed. But not every business can do that, obviously. So, just more top of mind issues for you. So, any questions from the group? We have much more important things to do this morning.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I have a couple of questions. First of all,
Sure.
I do know that at least a couple of supervisors are questioning whether or not we should continue with Thrive. Our budget process is coming up here. Is there any way that you can demonstrate the payback? I don't care if it's in job creation or in actual numbers of economic improvements to the county with respect to buildings or infrastructure or whatever, taxable property. We're having a hard time figuring out if it's worth the continuation for the investment.
Sure, yeah, and that's valid and fair. That's what we do with our annual reports. We
Because I
aggregate over that.
hear terms like tremendous and great and this and that, but I don't see any numbers.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it comes out in the annual report, which I'm gonna be delivering tomorrow morning, is our annual meeting, and then I will be before the full Board of Supervisors the 20th of October to break that out for Dodge County. So yeah, happy to do that.
Thank you.
You bet. Any other questions?
I do.
Yeah.
When we talk about new jobs, but how about retention, current jobs?
So that's really the emphasis. As a matter of fact, when we went through the opportunity pipeline and pulled the data together for the annual report that we're delivering tomorrow, about 37% of the new investment opportunities that were in the pipeline in the past year were existing businesses. Now that's good news, bad news, right? Because what that tells me is, we had a lot of new to Dodge or Jefferson County businesses looking to make investments more than our existing businesses were. But then again, we've had businesses shut down this year. I mean, it's fascinating to me because typically it's the opposite. I mean, as this group knows, I've been doing this for 30 years. Usually it's your existing businesses who are making the most investments. But interestingly enough, the data for this past year is telling me that the majority of those requests for new investment assistance are coming from businesses that aren't here. So that's good news, and it's also interesting just to look at. But yeah, as a matter of fact, we've had some, we just did the press release and had the ribbon cutting on the Auto Pets expansion. We were heavily involved in that. I could give you the entire backstory, but I can tell you this much. Corporate is out of state, and corporate was thinking about it but not willing to pull the trigger. And so it was Thrive Economic Development that pushed hard on corporate to get them to at least look at the proposal to expand their operations here in Juneau, and they have. And we had that whole ceremony, so that's public, so I can talk about that. And there may be more. That's really all I can say at this point. But that's an ongoing conversation. Things have worked well, and corporate and Thrive have a good relationship. So we can see what we can push for next. But that's just one. That's just one. We've had many, many, many interactions with existing businesses. We were at a Dodge County Business Friday, as a matter of fact, talking to them about their next investment, very large employer. So these processes, the sales cycle, you know, back to your comment, the sales cycle in economic development is not, it's not like we have a widget on the shelf that we're trying to sell, right? Sometimes you're engaged with businesses for a very long time before they pull the trigger and say, yes, I'll make that investment. And then sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's fairly quick. Just depends. Depends on the corporate mindset and their capital investment budget for the year.
Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions? Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Karen, are you there on the phone with us?
I am here, Mr. Chairman. County Board meeting for October 20th. You have the chart in your packet. Tonight, the Land Resources and Parks Committee meets, and I see a couple items on that agenda, on their agenda for the County Board meeting on the 20th. I don't know if you have any questions on anything on the chart. Vicki Pratt will be giving her economic development drive update, Vicki and Deb. And Abby Sauer will be giving the update on COVID as she has done in the last few months. That's all I have.
All right. Any questions for the county clerk? All right, now we're gonna jump down to number 15 because Nate has got some comments here. Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. In your packet, Art from MSA put together another summary on the CDBG closeout. He was not able to make it this morning, he wasn't feeling well, so. But this is no different than the past meetings, what you guys have received. Up on top, cash on hand, those figures were updated actually as of this morning. I got in a $50,000 check, so our cash on hand is actually at $950,000, and account receivables is about $650,000. So, as we've talked over the past year, you know that we have two options. Option one is the buyout on the free loans that are hanging out there. Or option two is we just go for the cash on hand. Right now, it's getting down to crunch time where we need to decide on which one we want to pursue. Art did notify me in a memo actually as well this morning that I put on your desk that if we do want to look at option one, there is perhaps a way for us to approach communities to help kick in money to help cover our costs that goes into what we have to submit back to the DOA on the buyout. There's no guarantee that we could actually get communities to do that, but some other counties have actually looked at that. So, looking at our timeline, we have to decide by the end of January. I would like to have a decision by exec committee though by November meeting on which way to pursue, because through the application process and all that, it takes time. So, would like to get some direction from you guys, and I can work with Kim and put together a resolution for the next executive committee meeting then. Just real quick then too on the one outstanding loan that is bad, working with Sean up in court counsel, and that's gonna continue to be an ongoing process. Property was sold, but we were not able to get any funding back on that, so we have to go through other options now. So, go ahead.
So in regards to that property, we can't write that off the books before this time limit closes out?
Correct, we were going to try to do that, however, now we have to go after the individuals personally and they're out of state, so that's gonna take even longer. So, it was originally hoped and thought that we would be able to write it off, but through other conversations with the DOA and court counsel, it's determined that we don't.
Go ahead, Jeff. I have a question. So now we're at what you call crunch time, about a year ago or whatever, as I remember this 1.6 number was like 1.9, something like that.
No, because we haven't made any new loans since then, so cash on hand and account receivables has been switching back and forth, obviously. The only thing that would change is if we had a new loan, which we haven't made a new one in over 2 years.
Okay, well, my question is, should we have done this sooner than later? And as I recall, the numbers were different. And it was, it was more advantageous to have done it a year ago.
The only, actually, I disagree, it's more advantageous now to wait because we have more cash on hand. Before we didn't. The figure that you were thinking of is most likely when we factored in the interest. So these are not factoring in the interest, this is principal only on that. So
Okay.
by waiting longer, we've been getting actually in some lump sum payments, quite large. So it just making it easy for us for that cash on hand for the option two. Well, for either option, but if we do the option two, it makes it a lot more safe for the county.
So,
Joe, or,
so maybe if we take option two, and we're gonna be stuck with the people that still owe the loan,
Correct.
right?
Yep, we still have to collect on the outstanding.
And then we send them back in.
Yep, it would be like a monthly remittance back to the DOA then.
So that's the only risk we would be taking is if they didn't pay their loans.
It would be my time or corp counsel's time to continue with that, but yeah, we wouldn't have any of our funds invested into that.
So what you're saying is there's no financial risk with option two with the loan that's gonna default?
Correct, option two is the safer route, whereas the buyout, yeah, obviously we have the one bad loan, the other two, they're in good standing now, but there's no guarantee, a year from now. And then too, Jeff, just to touch on, one reason why we couldn't even act sooner is because it was going through the court system on that property, and the county's working with the banks, so. Any other thoughts on which option you might like to see, or draw up a resolution for each one?
I would say, so we got it for next time. Go from there. Another month's worth of development might change something in that too. You never know.
Okay.
I think it would help us to have an assessment of the other two loans to know what our likelihood of collection is.
Anything else? All right, thank you.
County Administrator.
On your desk is an update on the routes to recovery. As was reported previously, an application was submitted in September, and the full payment was received last week on our application. So currently, through application periods 1 and 2, Dodge County has received a combined reimbursement of $156,232. Another application period starts today, and it's anticipated that an application will be submitted of approximately $150,000. And then the final application currently is scheduled for mid-November, and at that time, based on the completion of projects that have been approved, could be an additional $550,000. Right now, we're looking at tentatively a total reimbursement request through the various applications of a little over $863,000. There's still some other items that are pending, but that's where we stand today. And the original allocation was $1,463,000, and we're about $860 at this point. And there'll be an update to the Finance Committee next Monday on this as well, and we'll have another update at the next Executive Committee. Under the current program, the expenditures have to be incurred and paid prior to November 6th. And there's some speculation that that date may be extended, but there hasn't been any official determination or written confirmation of it at this time. So we're still operating under that the expenditures have to be incurred and paid prior to November 6th. Any questions?
So how does it work if we have a operation in progress, project in progress? We prepay it then, to make sure we get it, or?
With with the new guidelines that were, or the updated guidelines which were issued September 25th, there is a provision for prepayment. So that's something we have to take a look at based on the status of where we're at. But the two large projects and physical facilities, we have the confidence that they will be completed prior to that.
Questions?
I have two questions. One was about a light gate treadmill, how that fit into, this program.
It's for the brain injury unit at Clearview.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not sure if Ed is still on, but it's my understanding it provides the opportunity for social distancing during therapy and rehab for the brain injury unit.
So was this to be purchased anyway, or did they purchase it in response to COVID-19?
It's my understanding it was a purchase in response to COVID.
Were any of these items purchased in planning prior to COVID-19, or were these all in response to COVID-19?
The projects that have been identified here and are in progress were not contained in the 2020 budget. And that's one of the qualifications under the routes is to ensure that the items that are being requested are not in the 2020 budget.
That's fair, but were they in the planning stages for perhaps the 2021 budget?
There was one item that was identified in the 5-year capital plan, but as the capital plan based on direction by the finance committee and the board, that if an item is listed on the capital improvement plan, it does not guarantee funding. That the only funding of any of the items on the capital improvement plan, which will be coming to the county board in October, is still subject to each individual year's budget. So having a plan identified doesn't guarantee it will be in budget.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Emergency management.
Good morning. We worked on closing our plan of work for federal fiscal year 2020 on the end of September. Right now we're working with Public Health and Scott Smith they've split the National Guard test sites up by healthcare region. We're actually we're the furthest east and the furthest north of our region, so it goes down toward the Platteville area. I believe it's 8 different counties. They're splitting those up into task forces, and they're going to identify weekly testing sites. So their ultimate goal is they're bi-weekly testing sites. So working on setting that up, finding a location that can commit to that weekly test at a single location every week. I think that's all I've got. Any questions? No? All right, thank you.
Corp Counsel.
Good morning.
Morning.
I feel like we all need to do some jumping jacks or something. Everyone is kind of quiet on a Monday morning. Regarding contracts reviewed by Corp Counsel, going down the list, nothing for human services. Under the category of sheriff, reviewed a master service agreement for Lexipol for training, online training module. That was reviewed. A draft was submitted back to Lexipol, and ultimately changes were accepted and that is signed. Intrado, which is part of the 911 system, there was a maintenance renewal that was signed also. Ready Transport for transport services, that agreement was signed. Under the category of information technology, reviewed and signed a Baker Tilly infrastructure systems analysis. And I believe that, I'm gonna chalk this up to being signed, UPS generator battery replacement for certain wiring closets in 2 of the buildings. That was reviewed. The changes that I suggested or accepted. If it isn't signed today, it will be signed this week, so I'm gonna take it off the list. Under physical facilities, Cardinal Construction contract for the certain changes outside the jail anteroom. That was one of the projects that was on the list for the routes to recovery. That contract has been signed. Capelli Brothers, 911 mechanical contract. This is for the Sheriff's Office dispatch area. That was actually drafted and signed. Under the category of highway, Dodge County Airport parking lot project. This is a DOT sponsored project, and DOT asked the county to review the basic contract that they have. Though the county doesn't sign off on it, the county does sign off on the performance and payment bonds, so those were reviewed and signed. Okay, and that should do it. Kind of a short list for you this month. I'm just gonna stay up here because the next item is the guidance that was much discussed during the public comments. The guidance was released, and the county board, all of the supervisors should have received it on your desks in August. Along with a memo from the county board chair, and the memo indicated that the guidance would be reviewed by executive committee and human services and health board in October. So it's before you today. I'm really not gonna comment on the content. You all have it, I'm sure you've read it. You can form your own conclusions as to what it says. The next step in the process would be, according to the memo, is that this committee and Human Services and Health Board would review in November a draft ordinance. You remember the draft ordinance was on the county board agenda for discussion only. It was a draft at that time. The guidance, I've read it as well, and you probably all know, and everyone in this room probably knows, that I was part of the public health work group that put together the guidance. The guidance, while it does indicate some insights and indicates the impact of the Wisconsin legislature versus Palm case and describes that, any ordinance that will be brought to you will be your ordinance. It will be tailored for Dodge County. The guidance really does spell out a number of things, but it is just guidance. It kind of gives a general overview of constitutional provisions, what is in current state statute for local public health officers under 25203, and what the statute says with regard to 25202 and the state health officer. So it is just guidance, but again, anything that will be brought to you will be tailored for Dodge County, and it'll be up to you if you want to adopt it or not. So that's all I'm going to say about guidance. The November, as I said, the November committees will look at a draft of an ordinance. It will not be the same draft that you saw in June. It will be added to, because again, that was just a draft, and it was a very preliminary and early draft of an ordinance. And certainly we've been informed as the months have gone by as to some of the court cases and some of the state orders, like the mask mandate. So the draft will be substantially different. It'll again be brought to you in November, the two committees, or the committee and the board in November, and then back again through the route of the committees in December with the possibility of sending it to the board. But I'm going to be guided by your direction, and if in November, when the ordinance is brought through committees, if you have changes or you want to not advance it to the board, that will be up to you.
Kim,
Yes.
you brought up the Supreme Court case, the recent one,
Yep.
state, and Andrea Prom. Can you give me some opinion on the difference between the lawsuit and in the state responsibilities, and if the differences with the county?
So the Andrea Palm, Wisconsin Legislature versus Palm case, that really did focus on 252.02. And the concern with regard to the language in 252.02 is that it's very similar to what it says about local health officer and what the local health officer can do. So in that case, ultimately the decision was that Palm was outside her authority for doing what she did in terms of the Safer at Home, and I'll just generally call it a travel ban, and indicating certain businesses are essential and non-essential. So what the Supreme Court said was those are really outside of her authority. And in listening to the oral argument, and I don't know if this is gonna address what you're asking, but in listening to the oral argument, one of the things that came up, and it is even in the decision with regard to the unelected state bureaucrat. And in the case of a local health officer is appointed and not elected. And so some of the concerns that were addressed in the Palm decision are very similar to the concerns that would be with regard to a local health officer who would perhaps issue orders, like what Palm did. So the concern was, with the Palm decision, is the similarities in the language in the statute. Now, to address some of the concerns that were raised at the Supreme Court and by the Supreme Court decision, to have an ordinance that may pass constitutional muster, what you would do is draft an ordinance that would put in the hands of the legislative body the authority to ratify or even actually issue an order. Although it's in the statute that the local health officer issues an order, the legislative body could endorse that order or not endorse that order. So that would take away the argument of an unaccountable appointed bureaucrat. The other thing that the statute has, and this is again kind of going beyond what you asked, but the other issue that the statute has in the administrative code is, for purposes of isolation and quarantine, there is a judicial review of that. And if there is an issue with isolation and quarantine, there is a remedy to approach the court and get a court order. So there are two areas in the state statute where there is the possibility of either having a judicial review or a legislative review. So I'm not sure if that really answers the question. But
No, it's
the concern with the Palm decision, of course, was that it was with regard to a state health officer, and the Supreme Court struck that down. But the concern was with the local health officer, being the language is pretty similar.
Jeff?
Couple of questions. So, with the local health ordinance, if it's challenged in court, who bears the cost of the litigation?
It would be the county.
It would be the county.
The county would defend it.
Okay, secondly, it talks about the legislative body having the oversight of the orders or whatever. It all sounds great. The problem that I see, I don't know if you see it as well, and I'm asking if you do, is these decisions become politicized. You know, so we take it out of the hands of the so-called experts, and then we stick it in the hands of a legislative body that can't get it together. Does that make sense?
I guess I would say that if you have a local health officer that she's a trained individual, she qualifies under the statute, and you have a local health officer who brings to you as a legislative body an order that she wishes to issue or an order that she has issued.
But now you're circling back to saying, well, we have to accept it because she's the expert, so then, or he. So then why don't you just let them do it? Instead of letting it go through a political process and then have it all muckied up anyway.
Because I would think that you would want an ordinance that would have some constitutional protections in it, so that if it gets challenged, then you can say, well, our ordinance is constitutional because the legislative body ultimately made the decision, not somebody who was unelected or appointed, unelected and appointed.
Or don't have one at all, and let the state deal with it.
That's a possibility, and if the state issues something like the state has, with regard to the mask mandate, that also is being challenged right now.
Thank you.
Other comments?
So my plan would be, unless I hear differently from this committee or the Human Services and Health Board, is to again bring something to you in November, a draft, and get that out to you either with the packet or prior to, so that it's in your hands and you can take a look at it before your meeting in November.
Just one question. So if we don't do this, we're gonna be using the Constitution, the statutes that we have right now, and that's what we're gonna be following.
Right, and one of the things that counties are I don't wanna characterize it with stuck with, but one of the things that some counties have problems with is the fact that some counties don't have ordinances in place, like Dodge County, that would give any kind of enforcement mechanism. Other counties have ordinances in place whereby if there is a local health officer order, and the order is not being followed, then there is the possibility of issuing citations or having some enforcement mechanism. In Dodge County and some other counties, there's no enforcement mechanism. With regard to the state, the enforcement mechanism is criminal violation, but the Palm decision said that that isn't sufficient because the state statute and a state order does not put on notice the citizenry as to the possibility of criminal forfeitures or criminal fines. So yes, we would be left with just whatever the state is doing. There would be nothing local that the county health officer could do. One of the things that is in the guidance, and I'll just point that out here, is with regard to enforcement, the guidance does indicate that if you have an order, but you don't have an enforcement mechanism, that order really is just an advisory, or really is just guidance. And that's what the current Dodge County health officer has been doing. She has guidance on the website. If there are businesses where she's interacting with, because there is an outbreak, and remember the definition of outbreak is two. So while outbreak sounds very ominous, an outbreak is two if you have like a business or a location that has an outbreak. So currently, what the current health officer is doing is in the event of an outbreak or in the event of a hotspot, she's essentially working with the businesses, giving them guidance and advice as solicited, but there's no enforcement. And I should just say one more thing, outbreak in a nursing home is one positive test.
So Kim, according to 25203, the way I read it was, it's currently, the public health officer can go to the courts and ask for enforcement of an order, as long as it's, necessary and reasonable. And the court can order it, and then it gives a redress to the individuals, but then the court, so that's enforceable by the court. So that is currently in place. Are you saying that's not in place?
No, that is in place for individual orders. So for instance, if there's an order for isolation and there's no cooperation, the current statute and the current regulation gives the opportunity for the health officer to go to court, petition the court, as to that individual. But it is really limited to isolation and quarantine. So if you have an order of general applicability, let's just say, in Dodge County, there was an order for masking. Everyone had to mask. That's an order of general applicability across the county. There is nothing in the statute that would allow for a judicial review of that, because it is a general order.
But how about like a cease and desist order? So somebody was gonna have, let's say, a large concert, and she said, this is not a good thing right this time. Could she could go to the court and ask for a cease and desist order, correct?
I think that's debatable. It's something that we could try, but I think that it's debatable as to whether or not you could petition the court for that. Because the statute is pretty clear in that it is, more in line with an order that pertains to an individual, not a large gathering.
Would that be by the district attorney that would follow through on that, or would that be court counsel that would be pushing through that?
That would likely be court counsel. So if you have any questions offline or outside of the meeting, certainly you can, give me a call with regard to the guidance.
Chief Deputy, you have a comment back there?
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Sheriff's unable to be here today. He did ask that if this was discussed as far as moving forward with the ordinance or considering that, that I add that back when the ordinance was originally drafted, he presented the information to the police chiefs from across the county, and they all expressed concern. They would like to have some input into the ordinance prior to it being drafted because they felt that they had not had that opportunity up to this point. So I just wanted to share that with the committee if you're going to make a decision on whether or not that the Corporation Council continue with drafting that ordinance.
And I'll quickly address that. The Director of Human Services, as well as the sheriff has a meeting with all of the police chiefs. And Chief Deputy can correct me, but I know it's at least quarterly. The Human Services Director did go to that meeting back when the draft ordinance was presented. I am certainly willing to go to that meeting. I'm very open to any input from police chiefs as well as from the local municipalities. I think if there is going to be an ordinance, it would apply countywide except for in the city of Watertown, and it would be very beneficial to have the local municipalities provide their input. So in addition to the chiefs meeting or the county executive committee group, the Dodge County Law Enforcement Executive Committee group, I did convene a meeting with local municipal attorneys, and we were doing that on a regular basis. Like we were doing it monthly, but since things kind of took a different direction and the ordinance was put on hold, we stopped doing those meetings probably in August, but I'm certainly willing to reconvene that group and would like to have municipal input.
So we don't know when the meeting with the police chiefs countywide are going to happen?
I don't know. Chief Deputy, do you know how regular those meetings are? Or when the next meeting?
It's once a month. I believe we have one coming up. Let me check my calendar here real quick.
For some reason, I want to say it's usually the second Wednesday.
I think you are correct. I'm just thinking. Yeah, our next one would be October 14th.
So you may want to confer with them then.
Yep. Happy to do that.
To date, being that this has been in discussion since February or March, has there been any feedback from the local police chiefs about their feedback, or are we literally waiting 8 months to ask for their feedback at all?
I originally think the feedback was not necessarily to the ordinance, but the question about what would be the expectation of the local law enforcement agencies in terms of issuing citations and such. So we did have some of that feedback. My intent when the original draft was done is that citation authority would be given to the local health officer, and we wouldn't be overbearing or burdening further local law enforcement. But like in child welfare cases, law enforcement often goes out with our social workers if there's a child protective services call, and that would be a similar model that we would expect if there is a need for a local health officer to issue a citation or citations.
I guess I'm afraid I might have misunderstood the chief deputy. He stated on behalf of the sheriff that the police chiefs would like to have input in the language in the ordinance. And my question is, have they not provided that in this bulk of time, or are we going to be going forward and asking for that input now? I'd be surprised if you're meeting every month that you've never had this conversation.
Are you looking for me to comment?
Maybe, yeah.
Okay. Obviously, I wasn't sure who you were hoping to comment. So I guess I'm relaying what the sheriff asked me. Certainly there have been, I'm sure there have been discussions. I haven't been at the last couple of meetings because I had other conflicts. My guess would be that because the ordinance had been put on hold, that wasn't the top topic for discussions. So I don't want to answer for all of the police chiefs across the county, but that's where the sheriff just wanted to make sure that if this went forward, that they also have that opportunity. I've worked with Corp Counsel before. I know she's very willing to get feedback from me when we're working on items, so I'm sure they would value that opportunity as well to have some input or feedback from her. So
I'd be interested in hearing pre and post input, what their ideas are, what their vision is.
I can tell you that, at the prior meeting, and again, don't quote me on when the actual meeting occurred, I believe it was the May meeting of the law enforcement group, that draft ordinance was available to them. I had provided it to the sheriff. I didn't specifically ask for any feedback on drafting, but it was just the general, how will we operate if an ordinance like this goes in place? So I will share it again, the revised draft, and again, more than happy to sit down and listen to concerns or feedback and incorporate anything that makes sense for the county.
Jeff, public comments. So Kira mentions that, you know, the discussion on this topic started in February or March. Well, as I recall, that's when the COVID thing first became front and center anywhere in our world. Even though it probably could have been earlier, you know, certain countries would have acted differently. But at the end of the day, February, March, I have no idea when it started. It was presented to me finally in June, or for the June meeting. So if the, you know, police chiefs or sheriff or whoever else doesn't feel as though they've had ample time to react to it or you know, at least provide input, I would agree with them. I don't think it was technically really front and center to the population of the county until at least June. Okay, but here we are. If it did indeed start in February or March, this goes back to the deal about a legislative body even being able to act appropriately on an order. I mean, here we are 18 months away from that date, and we're still trying to decide whether or not we need an ordinance. And for 170 years prior to that, we hadn't seen cause to have one or justify one to begin with. So, to me, we're wasting a lot of oxygen and creating a lot of carbon dioxide over nothing, if you ask me.
Yeah. So you're reminding that the county board did adopt the emergency declaration on March 17th.
Correct.
Just to give you some context.
Correct.
That was March 17th, and then shortly thereafter is when the ordinance development started. And so you're right, it didn't get it, so between March 17th and June 16th, when the county board saw the ordinance.
But some of that was also in response to the fact that there were court cases going on at the state level because of mandates from the state.
Correct. Remember
okay, and then everyone had an oh my gosh moment. The state can't enforce anything, so the county better have an ordinance. Okay, plenty of counties have ordinances, and guess what? Their experience has been way worse than ours. Thank you.
All right.
Way to go.
Folks, if you're gonna clap, we didn't interrupt you or anything, so let's just hold it down, please. That's what we're not here for. All right. Update on the County Board Size Study Committee. That committee is gonna start meeting, their first meeting is gonna be on Thursday morning at October 8th. And so they will be checking out, studying if we need to, or any discussion about County Board Size Study Committee. So that will start on October 8th.
Who are the members?
What's that?
Who are the members on that committee?
It's gonna be Molly, Keel, Nickel, Gutenberger, and Mr. Marcy. So, all right. Update on scope of recording, broadcasting county board meetings. That was sent to you via email from Justin over the weekend. We need some direction on where we wanna go with this.
Thank you.
Morning. I did send an email. That's probably better. Yesterday I sent you an email with this same data and same memo, just to kind of overview of what, where we have been and where we're going. The IT department evaluated or researched Wisconsin counties with a population of over 40,000. We also researched Dodge County cities and villages on their proceedings, and then also a national viewpoint of the digital counties, top 10 of population under 150,000. In the findings, 90% of the websites reviewed provide online information about packets, meetings, and minutes, very similar to Dodge County. 50% have an integrated web calendar or website calendars, so you can see what dates the meetings are, what the agenda is, what the minutes are, what the packets are. Some have a link next to it with an audio file or a video file. 75% provide archive online information, mostly video, some audio, some transcripts. About 32% websites reviewed, they provide live phone video conferencing where the public is muted, not to, as a remote participation, they mute that if the public needs to communicate to the board that's in person. A higher percentage, as of recently, is to board members only, and that's overall, the live meeting conferencing has been increased since COVID. The live meeting broadcasting for audio, video, text, radio, television, podcasts, 65% reviewed provide live video broadcasting, very few audio and text streaming. 18 counties reviewed provide live television broadcast. 7 of the Dodge County citizens do provide a live television broadcast. We did reach out to Charter, who provides that public access channel. That industry is very fluid and very moving, changing, and it might be very difficult for us to provide. One thing that we did consider is a video file can be presented to those 7 cities and then broadcasted at a later date, not live. So that's always an option. Radio broadcasts and podcasts were difficult to find on all the websites. The solutions that we are reviewing, or potential solutions, is archived video or archived audio only that is uploaded to the same location as you find agendas and minutes and packets. That's where you would be looking at what happened with the minutes anyways. Archived video only, the same location, it would be a link to that same table within the webpage. Archived live transcripts, closed captionless, voice-to-text software, live video conferencing, that would be utilizing the phone infrastructure. A live video building audio. This is a public space, we have the county boardroom as a public space. Space has been needed, more space has been needed, so we're considering
what does the providing audio in the hallways look like? So that's one of the options. Live audio streaming, there's a few counties that just provide a live audio stream online. They can find that at the same location. Live video streaming, and then there's live video production. The reason why I spelled out the difference is because production would be multiple cameras. You can see what's on the screen. It's very professionally done. Currently, we're utilizing a website desktop web camera, and you can see the quality behind the chairman there. If you look at other counties, they might have multiple viewpoints. As you talk, it changes, and it's all archive only. That would be, we hit record on the Microsoft Teams event now. The video we could do as well, but that's a bigger file, it's a bigger size, the quality isn't as great as you can see. How much does the video provide when it's just looking at somebody that might not be talking? So that's something to consider. The other options, as you go down, are a little bit more expensive and based off of the direction of the executive and also IT committee, we'll start looking at requests for quotations and proposals. The three questions that we wanted to kind of get feedback on are, why record the Dodge County board meetings for the Dodge County citizens? And I heard last time was records, transparency, participation. What is the best method for Dodge County citizens to observe the county board meetings? Audio, video, transcripts by phone. I mentioned phone because as we're thinking about the solutions that somebody may have in their house or at their fingertips or in their pocket, everybody has a phone. So that's something that we can consider. Doesn't mean that they would be able to remotely comment or interrupt the meeting. That can be taken care of or handled. And if they needed to speak, it's advised that we speak in person. When would the Dodge County citizens like to observe the county board meeting? Archived or live? So those are the three questions that we'll probably review at tomorrow's IT committee. And if you have any feedback at this point, I welcome that as well. Thank you.
Justin? The one thing I saw, a number of counties were using YouTube uploads.
Yep.
And essentially, that would provide broad access. I don't know if there's any cost, and essentially it would also be archived on the YouTube site without us having any resources involved. What do you see as the downside of the YouTube?
You don't control what content might be on the site. It could be an advertisement for any certain thing. We don't control that. YouTube is being used. It's something we can consider. It is widely used nationwide. I can go on a different device at home, pull up YouTube, and see that the meetings are there. They are archived. Previous experience that I had was with the school district. We use livestream.com. Very similar to YouTube, but it's more professionally targeted. If you go to Commonwealth area school districts, back in 7 years now, you can see a list of all board meetings, of what occurred, and what was occurred during those meetings. And it's just those meetings. No other advertisements because it was a paid subscription. Initially, it was about $300. Now it might go up to $600 a year. So we can control those costs. We can control what content is there. So both are valid options and something we can consider. Thank you.
I think dollars and cents wise, it's the audio. Audio would be probably the best route to go looking at this right now, but we'll see what happens. Any other questions or comments?
One.
Yeah, go ahead.
Justin, I can't read this.
I know. I can get you a better copy.
I'll bring my pet hawk next time, and then he'll whisper in my ear what it says, but I can't read it.
Yep. I apologize. If you want a better copy, I can get that for you. And in the email, I did give you a warning, but it's small text, and it was just to kind of see what all counties were doing.
Right. Thanks.
Yes.
we really object to, YouTube being added in because of advertising content? Is that something that we're concerned about?
It's just something that you cannot control, and sometimes, depending on actually your own personal viewing habits of how you use YouTube, is the same advertising you would see. So, because it knows what you typically watch, so.
We wouldn't wanna have YouTube and then have all kinds of political advertisements right now,
Well,
especially today.
I would suggest you watch Social Drama. Because I think you're kind of discussing that right now.
Yes,
Yeah.
Social Drama is a good Netflix, video
Was
to
it
watch.
drama? I thought it was Dilemma.
Dilemma, maybe, yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I have to fix the phone, there's a tighter purring because the phone's off filtered.
All right, number 13, ordinance amendment, section 2.01, County Board Rule 14. Which is in your packet.
I'll just quick address that. That was, something that you decided on at your last meeting, and this is just the final form of the ordinance amendment. So it was in the packet, and it's ready for you to act on today.
Questions or comments?
The changing of one word from particular standing is really good.
I'm not seeing it in my packet.
The last page.
Last page, towards the end of the packet.
After all these kind
Got
of.
it. I think it meets the intent of what we discussed.
Nothing else, we need a motion to send to county board?
So move.
Second. Mike Rowland, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yes? All right, discussion potential amendment to the county board rule for order of business.
If I may, I'll address this. This was something that was put on the agenda last month, and Rule 4 is the order of business. The discussion had to do with public comment period for the county board. And if you are to do a public comment period, you would need to amend Rule 4. At the last meeting, either I was asked or I volunteered, I don't remember, to take a look at what other counties do with regard to public comment period. I did have somebody in my office do just a quick scan of county board websites or other county websites. And she looked at mainly the southern half of the state of Wisconsin. And what was found was that just on the whole, it's about a 50-50. Most counties have public comment period on their committee agendas. About 50-50, again, in the southern half of the state, have public comment period on the county board agenda. In some counties, the public comment period has some restrictions. So for instance, a couple counties say that you must register in advance if you're going to speak during the public comment period. You must email your comment by a certain date if you're gonna make a comment during the public comment period on the county board agenda. Some have no limitations. Some have the limitation that you're not allowed to address your comments if the item that you're addressing was previously on a Land Resources Committee agenda that was subject to an actual public hearing. You can't comment on anything that was the subject of a public hearing. So I guess it's kind of a 50-50 and some restrictions for those that have actually a public comment period on their agenda. Again, most of the counties do have public comment at the committee level. And if there is an issue with regard to, or not an issue, but if it is determined that you want public comment period on your county board agenda, just remember that it's not required by statute. It's optional for counties to do that. And the comments really should be pertaining to county business, not just something that's, you know, a general matter for discussion. It should be something that's on the agenda.
Go ahead, Jim.
I don't have a problem with some limitations. I don't want the public comment period to turn into a public hearing on every single topic. The other thing I don't want happening is somebody walking up using the time to admonish a supervisor or two because of a vote or action they took previously. I don't think that's appropriate either. I would like to allow some limited public comment if possible, and I think it's a good idea to do so. There are times no one's gonna show up.
I think it has to be what's on the agenda of the county board. Nothing else. Can't talk, you know, about, like you say, admonish anyone. It's gotta be some issue that's on the county board agenda to talk against that, and that's it. Can't go off on the tangent some other direction.
I will just say that it's good to have a public comment period on committee agendas, because the committees are what really drives the issues to the county board. So if somebody comes to pick your committee, highway committee, I guess there was some public comment at the highway committee. And it's directed and tailored to the issues that the highway committee is addressing. And some things may not even get out of committee after you listen to public comment. So I think it's valuable to have at least, at a minimum, which we do here in Dodge County, have these issues or have public comment on the committee agendas, because then they can address issues with regard to that committee of jurisdiction. So I do think that's important, and it kind of tailors what the issues are and what the public comment can be. Practically speaking, I don't know how you control how you have a limitation on you're not allowed to admonish. You can have a public speaker, public comment, and unless the county board chair cuts them off, that speaker is gonna say what that speaker wants to say.
Well, that's the gavel, you know.
Yeah.
That's.
And then somebody gets louder, and then the gavel, and louder, and it's difficult.
I don't disagree at all with Kim here on this particular issue. I think we allow the comments at committee meetings, and that's fine, and that's a good idea, and you know, that seems to work at this committee. And so I just do it at the county board meetings. I think would just make our meetings a lot longer and just be you know, a repeat of some of the other things that committees bringing forward. So I'd be against. Not real hard against, but I mean, still, I think it's just isn't necessary if we allow it at the committee level.
So I'll stop talking now, it's really up to you, but If you decide to have that, public comment period at the county board on that agenda, you'll just need to change your rule. So if that's the direction you wanna take, then that would be an issue I would think you take up at the next meeting, a rule change.
All right, food for thought. All right, county board strategic planning. Request for proposals. Draft that, yeah. Kim, you wanna talk about that too? You're drafting it.
Oh, sure.
This isn't gonna move ahead until it gets through the county board budget though either, so.
So you should have a draft, of the RFP, right, we're on the RFP now?
Mm-hmm.
I have a bunch of questions for you to consider. In the RFP, I put an either or in terms of a timeline. So I'd like some feedback on what the timeline, what you would like in terms of a timeline. When you would like the plan to be completed. So if you're thinking August of 2021 for the 2022 budget, that's spelled out in here.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a preference on either or? Or is that the plan? Is that the idea? Do you want this RFP, or I'm sorry, do you want the strategic plan done in 2021 for 2022 budget? Or do you want it expedited?
My opinion is wait till 2022, but, and I'm opposed to it anyway, so.
Well, maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit then, Kim, if we gotta get it through the 2021 budget first. So I think that's where we're kinda stalled at the moment.
Okay, so if you look on page 6, and maybe I am looking at this backwards, but if you look on page 6, the project timetable, you wouldn't even issue an RFP until November or December after the budget's approved.
Right.
So
Right.
that would be, that kind of guides either of those timelines. The
Well,
other
I
one-
kinda hate to say this, but if the county board approves that in the budget, then I think the exec committee is gonna have to meet after county board that day and decide if we wanna move with that plan or not.
That's an option too.
I think that's the plan. Because we need to get it through the budget, because we're wasting our time if we can't get it through the budget.
So if it is approved in the budget and you want to have an executive committee shortly thereafter, after the approval, but you also want to compress the time frame in which to get the plan done, I would like to be ready for presenting you an RFP that is something that could be released in short order, so like November or December. So you don't have to make any of these decisions today, certainly, or spend a lot of time on it in case it doesn't get approved in the budget, but I'd like to be prepared in case you want to move on it.
Joe?
Supervisor Shiamoy had some modifications or changes to this. Did you get those to get incorporated? or talk
No,
to
I
Kim
know
about?
they haven't submitted it, I had it all written out, and then I didn't send it yet, so. I'm just gonna give you a call and talk to you about this, if it was already in there, because I haven't seen what other people sent you.
There was one supervisor who did give me some feedback. I can't remember if it was verbally or by email, but the feedback that was given was have something in the strategic plan in terms of county board operations and not necessarily rules of order, but rules of conduct, so that's something that could be included in there. Maybe even like a job description as to what a county board supervisor does. Just a thought.
All right.
So I'm just gonna, if you don't mind, just kind of go through my questions so that you can put the bug in your ear so you can think about them. When do you want the plan to be completed? So kind of working back, when should you release it? And that goes to the timeline. What does the county board want to accomplish with a strategic plan? So that goes to the issue of scope. If you do release the RFP, who do you want to evaluate the proposals? You should probably indicate an evaluation team, and that could be the committee. You could do it by committee, and if you wanted to interview the proposers, the consultants, that's certainly something that the committee can do. We can do that in closed session. And then ultimately, who would you like to have administer the contract and the RFP process? So just a couple things for you to consider.
Do you want to comment now?
Now or later, whenever you want to provide them.
I mean, I think whatever we do, at least what I've seen in some other strategic plans, is that it has to be actionable. The results have to be actionable, not some ethereal concepts that you can't put a finger on.
A couple of things that come to mind with regard to that is we would want the proposer to indicate what would be the action plan, ultimately to implement the strategic plan. And the other thing I think is important is to make sure that the proposer indicates, what's your maintenance plan? It's not like you want to have a strategic plan and then shelve it. You have to have some maintenance of it, and that probably is an annual review. And then also considering that county boards have elections every 2 years, you're gonna need to have some ability to inform new supervisors of what the strategic plan is and what your action plans are. So I think that goes to maintenance of a plan.
And I think also some plan to look at this probably on a yearly basis to modify whatever it is, because what happens now, and we'll decide now, would be different than what happens 4 or 5 years from now. I think you have to stay on top of it.
For me, I had concerns about programs, who they're addressing, who they're helping, how many people does it help, what are the costs involved. It was really scope related. And then how we measure and then review whether or not we're going to make changes to those programs. What are the things involved in making changes to those programs? I have my concerns were mostly scope related. I'll get all those notes to you this afternoon.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, doing outcomes assessment, I think would be really important to do that maybe on the annual basis when you do the evaluation.
And I agree, I think that's the role of the executive committee to review the proposals, decide on what the implementation process is and the review process. I think that really is what our role should be.
Exactly. All right. Discuss status of Dodge County declaration of local state of emergency. I think we're status quo. Committee member reports on Wisconsin Counties Association. All right, set the next meeting date and time. Next meeting would be technically Monday, March 2nd. I wish it was March. November 2nd. But we're looking to change that to maybe a week earlier because that Monday would have to be finance and exec, because the packets need to get in the mail on Tuesday. And this is a county board budget hearing and county board budget that day. And Karen is very busy with election on Tuesday to get these packets out, so we would like to get that done then the next week. So looking at your schedules, the week of October 26th, is it possible to meet later that week or something?
Mid to late week is better for me. Mondays are terrible.
Monday's not good for me either.
You want to meet on the 29th, on Thursday, or what?
That works.
It'll be in the afternoon.
I think we work around whatever anybody can do.
Yeah.
I can make anything work any other day but Monday in the afternoon.
Same here.
wanna meet in the afternoon on the 29th then?
I don't care. No, I don't care.
4 o'clock?
You go.
Can we do 4 o'clock?
4 o'clock.
Just like at home, Joe.
No, we all live together.
All right, I'm here at 4 PM on the 29th.